The house was quiet. The neighbors said he mostly kept to himself. Friendly, even. But when the front door was kicked in, everything changed. The air turned heavy. The silence gave way to the stench of rot. On the surface, it looked like any ordinary home. Cluttered, dimly lit, nothing unusual. But behind closed doors, there were horrors no one could have imagined. Bones stacked like souvenirs. Photographs of the dead. Journals filled with fantasies turned into reality. These weren't just homes. They were crime scenes, torture chambers, and in some cases, graves. Welcome back to Prison Stories. Today, we're opening the doors to places the world was never meant to see. These are the homes where some of the most sadistic killers lived, hid, and murdered. It was a freezing November night in 1957. Bernice Wardens, a hardware store owner in Plainfield, Wisconsin, had vanished. The last receipt in the register showed a sale to one man, Ed Gein. Police drove out to his isolated farmhouse. What they expected was a suspect. What they found was something else entirely. In a shed behind the house, they discovered Bernice, strung up by her ankles, decapitated and gutted like a deer. But that was only the beginning. Inside the house, investigators stepped into one of the most disturbing crime scenes in American history. From there, continue into the horrifying list of what was found: skull bowls, face masks, nipple belt, etc. Then explain who he was and what drove him, not the other way around. As officers moved to the cluttered rooms, their flashlights caught glimpses of things that didn't make sense, until they did. On the kitchen table, a bowl made from a human skull. Hanging on the wall, masks made from human faces, some with lipstick, others frozen in screams. In the bedroom, a lampshade stitched from human skin, next to a bedpost wrapped in what appeared to be intestines. There were chairs upholstered with human flesh, a belt made of nipples, fingernails in a box, and even a pair of lips used as a pull string for a window shade. It was as if Gain wasn't just surrounded by death. He had built a home from it. Gain later confessed to digging up freshly buried women who reminded him of his mother. He brought their corpses home, skinned them, and turned their bodies into keepsakes. But it didn't stop there. When grave robbing was enough, he began to kill. In his mind, this wasn't murder, it was transformation. Gain was attempting to become his mother, to wear her literally. Psychiatrists labeled him criminally insane, and he would spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. The house, his house of horrors, was burned down by a local who couldn't bear the thought of it standing. But what was found inside lives on as one of the darkest, most disturbing discoveries in true crime history. A quiet man in a quiet town, hiding a nightmare behind a wooden door. The house sat at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester, England. Modest, unremarkable, a place where children played in the yard and curtains were always drawn. But in 1994, that home became the center of a murder investigation, one that would unearth decades of abuse, torture, and death. It began when police started searching for Heather West, the couple's 16-year-old daughter, who had been sent away years earlier but was never heard from again. Suspicious. Cadaver dogs were brought in. A search warrant was issued. Then came the digging. In the backyard, police unearthed bones. And then more bones. What started as a missing persons case exploded into one of the worst serial murder cases in British history. Over the next several days, 9 bodies were found buried throughout the property, under the patio, in the cellar, beneath floorboards. Many of the victims were young women. Some were lodgers, some runaways, and some were their own children. Most had been tortured, raped, and mutilated before being killed. Inside the home, investigators found more than just remains. They found a soundproof torture room, rigged with peepholes and restraints. Tools of sexual torture were hidden in drawers. Hundreds of pornographic photographs were discovered, many featuring the victims in their final hours. The walls held secrets, and the floors covered graves. And through it all, Rose West, calm, muddling appearance, denied everything. Fred West, on the other hand, confessed. But before he could stand trial, he hanged himself in his prison cell. Rose was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to life in prison. 25. Cromwell Street was demolished shortly after. The city refused to let it stand. In its place now is an empty space, a scar in the neighborhood where the Wests once buried their secrets. But those who walked through that house never forgot what they saw. A family home built on silence, suffering, and death. Apartment 213 in the Oxford Apartments building, Milwaukee. A small one-bedroom unit. Nothing unusual. The kind of place people forget as soon as they walk past. But on July 22nd, 1991, police stepped inside, and what they found would haunt them for life. They were responding to a call from a man who'd escaped Dahmer's grip. He was handcuffed, terrified, and claiming that something horrible was happening inside. When officers entered the apartment, the smell hit them first. Then they opened the refrigerator. Inside the fridge was a severed human head. In the freezer, hearts, biceps, kidneys, body parts packed like leftovers. In the bedroom, a 57-gallon blue barrel filled with acid and decomposing torsos. Drawers held Polaroids of victims, posed, mutilated, and dismembered. The closet was stacked with skulls, bones, and bleached skeletons he planned to preserve. On the bed frame, a shrine in progress, made of human remains, intended, Dahmer said, for meditation. There were tools, chemicals, incense, a power drill. The walls weren't stained, but the entire room reeked of death. It wasn't just a crime scene. It was a butcher shop, a lab, a temple to control, obsession, and death. Dahmer later confessed to 17 murders. Most of his victims were young men, often lured from clubs with promises of drinks, photos, or money. He didn't just kill, he experimented. He tried to turn his victims into zombies, drilling into their skulls and injecting acid, hoping to keep them alive, but submissive. It was about control, about keeping them, forever. And the apartment was a reflection of that twisted need. Neighbors had complained about the smell for months, but no one imagined this. After his arrest, the entire apartment complex was demolished. The ground it stood on is still empty, and what was inside remains one of the most disturbing crime scenes ever recorded. Dahmer turned a small apartment into a slaughterhouse, but nearly a century earlier, H. Holmes built an entire building for the same purpose. In 1893, thousands of people poured into Chicago for the World's Fair. Just blocks away, a strange, sprawling structure rose on a corner lot, a place owned by a man named H. Holmes. He called it his castle. Guests came and went. Rooms were rented. But little did they know, behind the ordinary hallways were secret chambers, sealed doors, and a basement that held terrifying secrets. When police finally investigated, what they found inside shocked the city. The castle was a maze. Some staircases led to nowhere. Some doors opened to brick walls. Others locked automatically. Hidden inside were soundproof rooms, trapdoors, and chutes that dropped straight into the basement. That basement was worse. Investigators found acid vats, quicklime pits, and a fully equipped dissection table. Scattered around were human bones, surgical tools, and a furnace big enough to cremate a body. Holmes admitted to using the building to dispose of bodies, though how many he actually killed remains unknown. He confessed to 27 murders, but some believe the real number was much higher. To the outside world, Holmes was a doctor and businessman, but his castle was a mirror of his mind, twisted, deceptive, and built for death. After his execution in 1896, the building was briefly turned into a tourist attraction, but mysteriously burned down before it could open. All that remains are fragments of the legend and the chilling reality of what was hidden behind those walls. Holmes built secret chambers into the walls of his castle. Nearly a century later, John Wayne Gacy hid his victims just beneath his ground, buried in the crawlspace of his suburban home. In suburban Chicago, John Wayne Gacy was a guy next door, a friendly contractor, the life of the neighborhood parties. He even dressed up as a clown to entertain children. But in 1978, when a teenager named Robert Pius vanished after telling his mom he was going to see a man about a job, that mask began to crack. Police searched Gacy's home, and what they found underneath it turned their stomachs. In the crawl space beneath the house, officers discovered a shallow grave, then another, and another. Over the next few days, the count kept rising. 29 bodies were found buried under Gacy's house, all young men and boys, many missing for years. Some were stacked on top of each other, wrapped in plastic or soaked in lime to hide the smell. The house reeked of rot and decay. In his garage, police found ropes, handcuffs, pornographic material, and a mirror setup he used to watch his victims suffer. He had carefully constructed his routine, luring victims with the promise of work, drinks, or clown shows, before overpowering them, assaulting them, and strangling them with his signature rope trick. He confessed to killing 33 young men in total, for were later recovered from the Des Plaines River, where he dumped them when he ran out of space beneath his home. The house was eventually demolished, replaced by a blank lot. Even today, the address number was changed, as if to erase what happened there. But those who saw what was beneath that house never forgot what they pulled from the dirt. We remember the killers, but sometimes it's the places they left behind that haunt us most. Rooms that witnessed unthinkable cruelty. Walls that held secrets no one was supposed to find. These homes were never just buildings. They were graves, laboratories, prisons. And long after the killers were caught, their homes told a part of the story they never could. Thank you for watching Prison Stories. If you found this episode compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries.